When we look at Irish wool today, it would be fair to say it is facing tough times. Prices are low, and too often this natural fibre is seen as a burden rather than an asset. It's hard for farmers who care deeply for their flocks and their wool. But the change is in the air. Across Ireland, people are reimagining what Irish wool could be. From scientists to small local producers, finding new ways to bring Irish wool back to the market with a reputation for the high-quality product that we once had.
Unfortunately, about 40 years ago, the demand and the value dropped, whereas now essentially at current prices, other than exceptional breeds maybe like the Galway breed, native breed, or the Blackfaced Leicester in Wicklow, the wool is pretty much worth 20 cents a kilo, and there's 2 kilos in average fleece, 40 cents, and the shearer must charge you at least €3. So it's an animal husbandry cost to shear the sheep.
If you're a farmer and you're depending on sheep to earn your living out of, you can get a certain amount of money out of selling it for meat, but the wool side of it, it doesn't pay you to tidy up your wool. So a lot of farmers are so frustrated with wool, they bag it up, it's dirty, they won't present it right. Some other farmers throw it in the hole in the ground because by the time you get to your co-op, it costs you money to go as far as the co-op as well. So a lot of farmers are deciding they're throwing it into the ground nowadays.
Something has to be done with it because at the moment it's either stored, you hear stories of it being burned, how real that is or not I don't know, but ultimately it's just given to somebody else to sell on. Certainly from some of the farmers we've been speaking to today, there is a desire to be more involved in that process and that they would do something with the wool if there was a pathway for them to do that.
So while the market may be struggling, the spirit behind Irish wool is alive and well. And with creativity and collaboration between all interested parties, there is no reason why we can't spin a brighter future from it.
We retail from our website woolo.com. Our range of products includes pillows, duvets, mattress toppers, wool blankets. We're not particularly concerned about a particular breed for our products. The important thing is it's clean, it's hygienic, and it's washed to a high standard.
Groups and companies such as Galway Woolen Co-op, Woolo in the West, or Eru in Wicklow are just a few examples of people making inroads into new markets, but not in a massive commercial way.
We had the wool tent last year down the food festival in Dingle. The Galway Wool Co-op were down there. They bought a scarf around your neck. It was done out of coarse wool. Actually, it was felt better, it was nicer than the ordinary merino wool.
We have our products as a showcase. We do sell some products in select places, but really it's supplying the wool to the knitting industry. That's a huge part of our business. And they're actually the fastest, most responsive, because they know, knitters know, this hasn't been available for so long, and they really value the raw kind of source of things.
Mills around the country are still turning over in their traditional markets, but not making a dent in the enormous stockpile of Irish wool that is out there now.
So there are pockets of wool for textiles, and it's about growing that percentage of the total flock. When we did our wool study for that, and we reckon about 2% of the current clip is textile grade. But if you can get that 2% to 2.5% and 3%, that's a significant extra volume of textile products we can make that can be branded, certified, traceable, Irish grown wool, never left the country, low carbon footprint, geographically designated, and as I say, conscientious tourists, environmentally focused, sustainable buyers will pay a premium for that.
These projects will take time, but there is a need for a market to buy wool now. The message seems to be find out what's happening in the world of wool products and match the right wool to the right job. Not every fleece will become a jumper, and that's no bad thing. There is quite a market out there for strong, coarse wool, but it means changes in our thinking of what is our target market.
We need to come up with new ideas if you want to do anything about wool and the wool prices, yeah?
Because it's ignorance is bliss as far as I can see. People just don't want to know about the alternative uses.
We're saying this is a back to the future project of revitalising wool, but some of it is doing things slightly differently to the habits of the past.
So what is the global industry looking out for today in the way of wool products? Construction is one of the biggest material markets in the world, and it is urgently searching for low-carbon natural solutions. Wool, and especially the coarser wool, fits that story perfectly. Companies like Flock in New Zealand, Whoopies in Switzerland, Havelock in the US, and Vector Labs and Wool Insulation Wales are all developing rigid sheep wool boards as a low-carbon alternative to conventional foams and fiberglass using coarse, low-value wool. Builders are drawn to them because they regulate humidity naturally, they're safer to handle, and they lock carbon into the fabric of the buildings instead of releasing it. Wool for house insulation is growing, now that the problems of moth infestation seems to be solved.
We're doing a few things. We're making the insulation, the sheep wool insulation, which is going very well, but we're only taking the dark blacks and greys off the bottom of the market.
Companies like Thermofleece, Black Mountain and Havelock Wool are using it in acoustic wall panels that make classrooms, offices and music studios quieter and more comfortable. Traditional lime and clay plasters are being strengthened with wool fibres to improve thermal and crack resistance. Roads are becoming a potential huge market. In the United States, wool-based erosion control blankets have been laid along highway banks in Idaho. By the second growing season, they were outperforming conventional coconut fibre mats in helping native grasses to establish, reducing erosion and cutting highway maintenance costs.
Good luck to them, because the more people come up with novel ideas, the better.
Some trials in New Zealand and US mix chopped wool into biofiltration layers along the roads to capture heavy metals, turning the wool fibre into a water cleaning tool. There are several EU research projects, notably in Spain and Italy, that have trialled keratin-based additives from wool to improve asphalt flexibility and reduce microplastic shedding, making roads more flexible and longer lasting.
The other thing involved with the Wicklow Uplands Council and National Parks and Wildlife Service is a project looking at the use of the wool from the mountain in Wicklow on the mountain for pathway building on floating pathways on the peat, and for things like bare peat restoration, where the idea is to develop wool matting to cover the bare peat and stabilise it and make it into replace the imported coir rolls which come from India with a very heavy carbon footprint, and replace it with wool filled rolls.
Wool is also finding its way in packaging. In Britain, companies are already shipping food and medicine across Europe in insulated boxes lined with wool. These packages keep their contents chilled for up to 2 days and replace petroleum-based foams with natural, compostable material. These are large-scale, practical uses that could one day require thousands of tons of Irish wool. Wool is renewable because sheep create a fresh fleece every year, and its natural characteristics make it an environmentally benign alternative to all synthetics. A material known for being insulating and breathable, elastic and soft, and biodegradable, fire retarding, UV protective and anti-wrinkle. It can be woven into anything from tough water repellent working fabric to an extremely fine luxurious cloth. All those properties make it a viable product for climate-aware industries looking for sustainable products to make.
One of the problems is that synthetic materials are quite cheap, and over the last 50 years or so, wool products has been replaced by synthetic materials, but as latest research would indicate that a lot of these products contain microplastics and very bad for our health. That's one of the reasons people are moving back over to natural fibres such as wool.
And we are seeing, especially across industries, that consumers are asking for that more. A lot of brands are now having to be sustainable, not because they want to be, but because they have to be, and that's a win-win.
And in a world that's, where climate change is so much on the agenda, and sustainability and upcycling and reusing and all of the rest of it, and we haven't one that's there in front of us, and they choose not to use it, you'd question why.
The fashion industry has returned to wool in the International Woolmark Prize, which returned this year with global attention on new techniques and circularity, both in Europe and in Ireland.
I think about 70 to 80% of most wool goes into carpets. And the biggest uses of carpets are casinos, hotels, and cruise ships.
In research, scientists in Europe are turning discarded wool into moldable bioplastics, opening up possibilities in product design, packaging, and interior fittings, as well as research using wool in 3D printers to reduce the plastic content in products and make them biodegradable. In Ireland, there is a new EPA-backed scientific research project called Revere that is looking to find ways to build regenerative, high-value wool system here by looking at the keratin aspect, but also the best way to create a sustainable mobile washing plant for Ireland.
There's two people in Galway who have modest-sized scouring plants in their establishments. And one of the things we're looking at under the Leader Partnership Wool Project is to maybe look at getting funding for a demonstrator or scouring plant that would tie in with the academic research projects to say, okay, the researchers think this is the way to go, and actually do it in a live plant that can do moderate rather than tiny, moderate quantities. Because then we're also saying that if you can guarantee some researchers, including larger commercial entities, modest to reasonable quantities of scoured wool, they say, well, now it's worth our while investing in research and development because we will have a viable supply of traceable blah de blah wool, which at the moment they don't have.
And there's absolutely the opportunity to have a scouring facility in Ireland, but we would absolutely need to operate at a smaller scale and potentially use different types of scouring technology.
So we will be looking at different end products from wool, and based on that we will find out what's the impact or the benefits of using wool. So it's open at the front.
A challenge associated with that is limit levels associated with what is clean wool, and that's also something we want to look at over the next couple of years to try and determine, number one, what are limit levels for what is clean wool, but clean wool for a specific application. You don't need to have wool clean to the same level for use in clothing as potentially for use in composites or concrete.
If the effort was to go into securing some form of washing facility for wool in this country, that would make, I think it'd be a game changer. That nothing else can happen maybe until that happens.
Groups are turning back the clock as they seek to use wool in renewing the bogs or creating pathways in bogland, just as our ancestors did.
Wool that isn't really usable, say, even in carpets or garments. It can be used for insulation. It can be used, as you say, in ground road path preparation. It's a suppressant for weeds in areas where you want to suppress them. It can be incorporated into farmyard manure, say, with straw, and it has a nutrient value insofar as that it's quite a high level of nitrogen in it.
it is good that people are talking about it, but it's for, really need to get governments and probably the EU Commission and stuff involved and looking at it. We're wearing too much clothes that's blasting and synthetic, so we are, and that's not very environmental friendly. It's coming from China, it's coming from wherever. We could be doing so much. We could be doing so much with what we have.
If wool was used, in all of the facets that it's actually usable in, it'd be a scarce commodity.
The way we sell wool seemingly must change. The old model, anonymous bales shipped out in bulk, will probably never deliver fair prices again. But wool that is prepared, graded and targeted for specific uses in construction, packaging, infrastructure or design absolutely can.
Also, we have different breeds, so we have to separate that and find markets for different types of wool of different particle size. So that also leads to certain challenges.
Maybe we can organise supply through regional hubs that can bale, grade or certify wool consistently. We need to focus funding into ideas that can use Irish wool effectively. We also need the government to help its sustainable goals to actively encourage the use of wool in the building trade.
And if you're retrofitting your house, drawing a government grant, why don't one of the stipulations in that be, if you're pulling a grant, that you use homegrown Irish wool? And that'll help the hill farmers, the coarse wool industry out then. But we need the government to move in that. They're doing it in Wales and Great Britain. Why can't we do the same here?
We've been engaged with a project in a UNESCO heritage site in Ayrshire, Galloway in Scotland, where they hired a textile artist and said, we want you to take this, the wool they said would never end up in a garment, and we want you to design and work us through a process to make garments from that. And they've now launched a Merrick brand in Scotland, which is made with the coarsest grade of Scotch blackface. So a lot of the ideas of what is and isn't doable are changing.
Resolving the issue of wool being a Class 3 waste is a major issue. And if we change that designation, it will open up the agricultural sector as a massive market as well.
Unfortunately for the wool sector, at the time of foot and mouth in 2002, the Irish government took a very strict interpretation of Category 3 around wool.
If you're saying Irish wool is Class 3 waste, who's going to buy that for high-end production of anything? It's a stigma. From a marketing perspective, it's an absolute disaster.
And there are some discussions going on with the Department of Agriculture at this stage to say, well, what might be a derogation depending on the use. So rather than just saying all wool is the same process regardless, it is what's a derogation for simpler uses on the mountain or whatever, as distinct from something that's going into a textile that ends up in a shop and in stores and on people's bodies.
This is where people really need to come together around a table and say, okay guys, this is outdated. This is ridiculous. And there was a while 10 years ago I could see when I was going around places that just was not going to happen. But now there's enough groundswell of people to look at the lawmakers and say, this is ridiculous. Can we just change some laws around this, please?
We may need a testing of wool to be instigated to make sure of its absence of dangerous chemicals, but this can easily be solved if there's a political will to do it.
Look, there's all ongoing, I suppose, research into this with the UCC in Cork and the MTU in Tralee. So there's a lot of good work going on in the background. And from all these studies that come together, hopefully we can get the government to move and get society to move. It's pointless having the government move unless society moves with it. We have a modern, I suppose, product that ticks all the environmental boxes for modern living in this country. And why can't we all get on board with it and use a lot more of it?
People are more environmentally switched on. They're becoming more environmentally switched on. Ordinary people realise that, you know, wool for a lot of products that we use in life is the way forward. And I wish them good luck, and hopefully it will come to fruition in the next, I would say, 4 or 5 years maybe, you know what I mean?
The truth is, wool hasn't failed us, our markets have failed wool. But those markets are changing fast. In a world searching for natural, renewable and circular materials, wool's time is coming again. If we work together, politicians, farmers, processors, researchers and buyers, we can ensure that Irish wool is no longer a cost on the balance sheet. It can be a proud, profitable product once more, and a vital part of Ireland's sustainable future.
We need action. There's enough talking going on at the moment, and there's too much talking going on.